What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Comic Flashback. I'm Marvel Across 316, and we are looking at Ultimate Spider-Man issue number 23. This issue's title is Responsible. And so, what could Spider-Man be responsible for? We're going to have to find all this out. Another awesome cover here. And so, let's go ahead now and begin the story. We have a good cast of characters here. We have Peter Parker, of course, Aunt May, Mary Jane Watson, Harry Osborn, Norman Osborn, Gwen Stacy, and then Flash Thompson. And so previously in Ultimate Spider-Man, Norman Osborn was developing a wonder drug called Oz. Testing of the mystery drug created the genetically altered spider that accidentally created Spider-Man. Peter was shocked to find that Harry Osborn is back in town and back in school. Found this out last issue, and even more shocked to find out that Norman Osborn is alive and well. Harry invites a shocked and terrified Peter over for dinner at their new penthouse apartment in the city. Peter meets Norman Osborn for the first time since their terrifying battle months ago, but Peter doesn't know what he is going to see when Norman appears, as he was the Green Goblin the last time they met. Norman looks like a normal human being, but he tells a shocked Peter that he is no longer allowed to be Spider-Man and that he now works for Oscorp. Peter stares in shock as Norman injects himself with the Oz drug, turning himself into a more mature mutation of the Green Goblin. And so that is where we left off last issue. Got to give credit where credit is due also. This issue is brought to you by Brian Michael Bendis, who wrote this story, Mark Bagley on the penciling, Art Thebert on the inking, transparency digital coloring here also, and Chris Elapoulos, the letterer, C.B. Sobolski, associate editor, Brian Smith, associate editor, Ralph Macchio, editor, Joe Quesada, editor-in-chief, and then Bill James, president and inspiration here. So let's go ahead now and begin the issue off. We have Spider-Man swinging through the city. It is nighttime here. The moon is out in the city here. And so what exactly is going on here? So this actually takes place 12 minutes after Peter Parker had the conversation with Norman Osborn. And he's thinking to himself, oh God, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And so 12 minutes prior to him swinging through the city, remember we left off with Norman Osborn injecting himself with that Oz drug. I was wondering exactly what that drug was. I thought it was like a serum of some sort, but actually it was the Oz drug. And that drug transforms him into this demonic looking Green Goblin. And so we say, or basically we start the issue off saying, okay, we just so we know who's in charge. And so basically Norman Osborn as the Green Goblin is basically telling Peter that he owns Peter Parker now, that Peter Parker works for him, and he's going to threaten the life of Peter Parker as well as those he loves the most, like Mary Jane Watson and Aunt May, if Peter Parker does not comply. And so we see that the Green Goblin takes out the Oz drug and injects himself one more time. This time it's going to cause him to revert back to his human form as Norman Osborn. And I mean, Peter Parker has to be just scared out of his mind. He has to be. And I would be too. I mean, so Peter Parker finds out all of this new information. I mean, this is just crazy stuff. So Norman Osborn says, where was I? Oh, yes, Harry. So we see Harry keeps calling out for his dad or whatever. But Norman Osborn's ignoring it. He puts on this robe as he reverted back to his human state. He came back naked. So, I mean, he has to put on a robe. And so we see that Peter Parker, again, is being threatened here. He says that basically if Peter does not comply and doesn't work for Norman Osborn, then they will battle to the edge of death. And he basically says, I will let you try and heal. I will watch you struggle through the broken bones and the severed nerves and tissues. And most probably you will heal. And then just as you begin to feel yourself becoming human again, I will beat you to death. And so finally, he says, all right, let's go, or whatever. And we meet basically Harry Osborn. He wants to show this tape to Peter Parker basically about everything that's been going on for these past few months as Harry Osborn was in Colorado. We also found out while basically Norman Osborn was revealing all this information that in Colorado, Harry Osborn was being basically drugged up and told all these crazy stuff here just for him to forget his past. And so it's just crazy stuff. Norman Osborn doesn't really care about his son. He's just using his son, and his son has no idea that his best friend is Spider-Man and that his dad is the Green Goblin. And so they watch this tape, and this is basically an old news tape about just this guy's going to interview Norman Osborn. He gives all the latest information about how back in the 90s, Norman Osborn was a big guy for Oscorp Industries, and basically he invented the new Oz drug and everything. That was a big hit. All of a sudden, there again, we saw that big accident that took place, and we thought that Norman Osborn was dead, but in fact, he's been in hiding this entire time. So Peter is forced to watch all of this. I mean, this is just crazy stuff, and Peter gets so freaked out that he basically says, "I gotta go," and so he runs out. Norman Osborn says, "I'll just let him go, Harry. You'll see him tomorrow." And so we see here that Peter Parker comes back to his place. He's feeling defeated. He feels like he's just, I mean, he's not going to be able to look and get any help now because Norman Osborn basically owns him now. So he comes back and Aunt May's waiting for him at the house. She asks, "How was the limo ride?" And he's like, "Stank." And so, he's talking with Aunt May and he's like, "Look, it's been a long day and I just, I'm so sorry, Aunt May, for lying to you. I really am." And Aunt May's like, "Peter, are you okay? What's going on?" And so he just hugs her and she's like, "Did you eat? Or what's going on?" And she said, There, come here." So she basically hugs and comforts him here. And, the night goes on. Peter returns to the basement where he basically hangs out most of the time, and he's looks like he's been crying and everything. He gets a phone call, and it just so happens to be Mary Jane. She's on the speaker. She's like, "Peter, it's Mary. Pick up if you can." So Peter answers in desperation. He said, "Mary." And so she's so happy to hear from him. She's so just happy to talk with him again because she has feelings for him. And she says, "What happened? What's going on? What happened with Harry? Did you go over there? What was it all weird? Did he say anything about anything?" And because you remember, Harry Osborn revealed to Peter Parker last issue that Mary Jane is in love with Peter Parker. And so while Peter is talking on the phone with Mary Jane, he hears a knock on the door of the basement, and he's like, "Oh man, I think Harry's here." He said, "What?" And so while they're talking, she's like, "Man, it's like 11 o'clock. I can't come over," because Peter wanted Mary Jane to come over. And he notices that in the window, it just so happens to be Gwen Stacy. And he's like, "Hold on, Mary Jane." So he opens the door, and Gwen basically says, "Look, um, basically, my mom ran out on me. She's in Chicago right now, and I feel like I'm going to kill myself." I mean, she's literally saying this. So Peter lets her in, and she said, "What kind of freaky scientist lab thing do you got going on down here?" Peter says, "What are you doing here, Gwen?" She said, "I have no place to go." So Peter gets back on the phone and says, "Look, Mary Jane, I'm going to call you back, okay?" And so Mary Jane's like, "Wait, don't." And we see her click. And she says, "Sorry I ruined your phone sex. Nice boxers." So Peter Parker rushes to the room of Aunt May and says, "We got a problem here." And he's like, "Look, there's a girl in the basement." And Aunt May's like, "Is this Mary Jane? I told you this is not acceptable behavior." He said, "No, it's the girl from school, the new girl, Gwen Stacy. She's kind of cuckoo. Look, she's saying she's going to harm herself, and for some reason her mom left ran out on her. She left to go to Chicago with some guy or something, and her father's at work, and I just don't know. So Aunt May gets up, puts on her robe, and basically she's going to make eggs for Gwen Stacy and Peter Parker. I mean, this is probably like 3 in the morning or whatever. I don't know. And so while Aunt May's cooking eggs and Gwen Stacy's enjoying it, finally Gwen Stacy's father arrives, Captain Stacy, talks with Aunt May, and basically Captain Stacy is going to have a long talk with Gwen. So the next day at school, we see Peter Parker is telling Mary Jane all about this. This is crazy stuff, and that Gwen Stacy came over to his house, and Aunt May made eggs for both Gwen and her father. And while they're talking, and Peter wants to tell Mary Jane about what happened at Harry's place with Norman Osborn, we see Gwen Stacy rushes up from behind and like hugs Peter Parker. And so again, this is not making Mary Jane feel good because she does not like Gwen. She thinks Gwen is some competition. Basically, Gwen says that Peter Parker is like the best, and basically Aunt May rocks. So both Peter Parker and Aunt May rock or whatever. And Gwen says, "Hold on to this one, MJ, solid gold." And so Peter wants to again tell Mary Jane about Harry, but then we see over the intercom Peter Parker needs to report to classroom 222. And so Peter's like, "Now what? I got a trigonometry quiz." And he's like, "Look, Mary Jane, I'll talk to you after class." So he walks away. He meets this woman, and she looks familiar. If you don't remember, this is Dr. Bradley. And again, what the heck is going on? Peter's asking this question. What is going on? She asked him, "Were you with the Osborns back in New York? I know they came back to New York City. Were you in their penthouse last night?" And so Peter's like, "How do you know this?" And then she's like, "If you could just answer the questions, Peter. Did he threaten you? Did he tell you that he is aware that you are Spider-Man?" And this is a big shock to Peter. So how in the world does Dr. Bradley know that Peter is Spider-Man? What the heck is going on? And then this woman says, Dr. Bradley says, "Do you want to take it from here, sir?" All of a sudden, the spin starts to spin around here, and this is how we're going to end this issue. So what the heck is going on here? I think Norman Osborn is involved in this for some reason. We'll have to figure all this out as we look at issue number 24 coming up next. And until next time, keep reading comics.